Let's face it, we all settle, more or less, but the best among us settle less.
What I want people to hear and feel is that where you start is not where you end up, and that sometimes things that appear bad are really awesome, and that those are the things that shape your perspective, those are the things that energize and inspire. So if you want to be more interesting, be more interested.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I learned early, ask
Great
better
point.
questions. Well, that's how people know you care. Until they know you care, they aren't listening. But if you don't know what your goal is and you're not clear in where you're going, it's impossible to chart that path and to have progress favor your energy, your sense of purpose and potential. And so I think you have to know what you're fighting for. But more important are the relationships with the people inside the ecosystem. That fed my soul. And that made big possible, because it's not just me, it's the concentric circle around that culture of contribution. I think subconsciously, Pat, I took on the goal and role of I'm gonna give it all I've got. And if I fail, I'll dust off and try again. And that's where, honestly, big growth showed up.
Rick Hale, welcome to Personal and Professional Best. Everything that you stand for, because I've known you for a long time, is reflected in our program that we did last month, which is it's not just business, it's personal. Because your pursuit isn't about money. Your pursuit is about being the best at what God gave you the gift to be for the benefit of other people. The byproduct is we make money doing that.
Yeah.
You know, for all of you in the audience, I mean, you know what's true is when someone says, "Can I help you?" You go, "No," because you don't trust them. You have your defenses up appropriately. So when you meet people that you really trust, it's always because their motive is to benefit you and you know it. And those folks, they wind up making magnificent differences in the world. They leave being a child missionary and they wind up writing books. They do the exceptional stuff. Thank God for Grandma, and for, in a different way, for your stepfather voicing into you messages that made a difference for you. So what inspired the book? Like, you know, I've been told by a lot of people, you should write a book, Pat. You should write a book, Pat. And then I met with Andy Stanley, John Maxwell, no kidding. And I said, I'm thinking about writing a book. You know what they both said? We don't need another book. And I said, you're right. There's a million books. They weren't trying to stop me. They were trying to get me to be thoughtful about what I really wanted to do and why I really wanted to do it. But there's a reason why you did this. Tell us.
Well, so there's probably 4 or 5 reasons, and I'll jump through them kind of quick. One of them, one thing, by the way, the greatest investment you can make is in yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I always held high regard for personal development and education. I'm a voracious reader. I love going to seminars and events where talented people show up. And I've discovered the more you invest in them and the more expensive they are, the caliber of person elevates accordingly. And they're different people in different places. And if you're the average of the 3 to 5 people you spend the most time with, maybe you should dilute the pond with some really talented people and see what happens, because that organic and that flow of ideas and potential, you know, all of a sudden you see yourself differently, because remember, we're all just mirrors reflected in other people. And so I took that to heart, and I was at a 2-day event Diana Kokoska with our company hosted called Recharge in San Francisco. And we were in the end of day 1, we went on a field trip. And this guy, I hop on the bus to go see, I think it was like Disney's, the original house, you know, Walt Disney grew up in, and it's now a museum. But that's not even the point. The point was I jumped into the bus, jumped in the front row with a guy who he was writing in a tablet, in a journal. And I sit down and he looks over and he's like, "Hey, I'm Kevin." And I'm like, "I'm Rick." And we start talking. And this guy, I've never had a person probe my opinion, perspective. Like, he honored me in a way that no one had ever, that I felt that energy from a stranger immediately. And they were really compelling questions. What'd you get from today? We had multiple speakers and experiences and breakouts. And I was sharing my ideas, and he starts writing them down. He goes, "Do you mind if I write a few of these things down?" He goes, "These are like Rickisms, man. These are gold." And I'm thinking, he made me feel so important. And I think that's just an amazing gift to give another human being. Right behind affirming them is to make them feel important and heard. Yeah. And he then said something that I've learned now as a quote from someone else that he'd borrowed, which we're all working off, you know, borrowed material. Sure. It's really your story that brings it to life. He says, "I always carry 2 books, the one I'm reading and the one I'm writing." And he goes, "I'm working on the one I'm writing right now." And I just thought, how cool is that? Wow. And so he planted a seed. And again, seeds that are left ungerminated and fertilized die. I let that thing percolate. I'd water it occasionally, think about it occasionally. And like most people, felt insecure. Who am I to write a book? Who am I to? And so here's how I got over the hump. One, I just want everyone out there to hear this. You are an author. Every day is a chapter, a page. It's a page in your book. And it's either one that stays in the book or one that you tear out and burn. And, the better your strategy around, what are you fighting for, what matters, and the more relational energy you plug into your life, the better that page is going to be. And I started talking to my dad about this. Like, I started thinking, why? Maybe it's just a journal. Maybe it's just notes. And, my dad's from Europe, and as I said earlier, and I knew very little about my ancestry. I mean, literally next to nothing. And I thought 3-4 generations back, I can't name them. I can't tell you what they did for a living or what their vocation or their trade. And I thought, how cool would it be to discover a letter somewhere in a trunk or in an envelope with dust, a dusty trunk, and see what their best day, their worst day, what were the lessons, what was it like? And I thought, I'm going to leave a journal and a legacy letter for my kids, because they're not going to remember this. And their kids are, there's no way the story's not going to translate, and it won't even exist. And so that's where it started. And then as time went on, I thought, well, why not just, 12 principles that really mattered? And then what are the stories to support them? And I didn't want my story to die. And I believe every human being on this planet has a story worth retelling, and has a story that someone needs to hear, not in 100 years. They need it now. And so the better you are crafting experience that lead to stories that have resonant energy, the better your legacy.
I agree with everything you just said. The caveat I would add at the end is everyone's story is worth telling if they stop settling.
Yeah, well.
And you never settled.
Burn a page or keep a page.
Well, there's so many people that get stuck in the loss and pain that took place in their life and the choices they've made that have caused pain for themselves and for others, and the choices others have made that have caused pain for them. And they get stuck and they just allow themselves to stay there. They settle. And then they don't have a story that they love that's worth telling.
Right.
But everyone that's here today, if you did get stuck, you can get unstuck. Just choose today to write and start writing a better story. Rick did. I did as well. And you can write an exceptional story. It's up to you to do it. I'm glad you did take the time to write a book.
Well, so there's one more point. So this is the last point, and the byproduct of committing to crafting a story worth retelling is that your subconscious brain, Pat, is a riddle solver. That's all it is. It's going to work. Right now, if I can't remember a name, and hours from now it pops into your head, that's evidence and proof that it's in the background working. So whatever you're feeding it is what it's working on. And the minute you decide that your life is worth documenting one day, whether it's a journal, whether it's an actual book, almost irrelevant. But as soon as you plant the seed that you're going to live that life, you'll start seeing things differently. I had a friend, Dick Dillingham, tell me once, I was in a class at Keller, and he said, how many of you think you're cool? And I, quick reflection, I'm like, yeah, I had long hair at one point. I played in a band, and I was not uncool. And he said, how about KOOL? And of course, we're stunned. We don't know what that means. He goes, keen observer of life. Become a more keen observer of life. And so the secret sauce to this whole book idea, just start paying attention. You'll be amazed how many stories are worth retelling. Wow. Something humorous, something, catastrophic, that there's a lesson attached, something glorious and beautiful like the most amazing sunrise, and with the most amazing people or a person. And so the more you pay attention, the more you'll connect dots, and let your subconscious brain work on that riddle, not the bleeding edge that media shoves down our throats.
You said so much in answering that question that is just so compelling. I wrote down one of my favorite quotes by Coach Saban. I'm kind of an Alabama fan. I'm also a Georgia fan. I'm a fan of best.
I don't mind
the end, when I see exceptional, when I see high performance, I go get around it. That's why you're here today, because I want to be reinforced. I want to be around people who think and do exceptional, because I want to be in that club. I want to be part of it. And all of you, Rick, you said, the last 3 or 5 people that you're around, I think we settle by being around people. They're not throwaway people, but we need to get intentionally around people that are pursuing exceptional.
Absolutely.
Because what happens is there's something different about what they do. They on the hall on the way through, there's a quote by Coach Saban that says, everybody wants to be their best, but not everybody wants to do what the best do. So there is clearly a behavior every single day that takes place. We're going to get to that in a second.
are.
Yes, we are, because that's one of your chapters. One other thing I just want to point out about what you said is there's nothing new that's worth saying that hasn't already been said.
Right.
It's just your story, and you're the storyteller. Our lives are the stories. But the things that drive best, the things that drive us to our emotional state of being motivated to be our best, they're always based on the same over time, new old stories that have been told over and over and over again through the lives of other people.
Right.
We're just here to inherit it from you today.
Yeah. Well, learning is not linear. If it was, everything you need to know, you probably learned in kindergarten. There's even a book about it. I think it's Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. It's layered. And what you hear today, you could have heard it last week, but where you are today will resonate differently because of the immediate circumstance.
So everyone in the audience today wants to get rich. There's a definition of rich that sometimes we've got to kind of rewrite. But when I meet like my dad, who's nicknamed the Source, he's 86. Financially, he may not be rich, but he's the richest man I know.
Right.
Because relationships, connections, his investment in the lives of all of his family and everyone else that he's ever crossed paths with, he's so rich because he's enriched. You have a chapter about building connections. Talk to us about building connections and building better connections.
Yeah, I mean, again, back to the reflected energy of the people you surround yourself with. There's nothing more important than elevating your own self-perception. And to me, so for one, integrity, by the way, I just want to touch on this, is when your inside voice and your outside behavior are aligned. And the challenge sometimes in the human experience is that we don't see ourselves in the stories we're crafting in our heads. And if you can't visualize yourself, it's hard to execute on those with committed passion. And it's funny, Tim Tebow, of all people, taught me something. Our family doesn't wear a lot of orange other than Clemson for our boy Luke, and likely just once or twice a year. Red and black, that's our color. But Tim Tebow talked about what passion was, and he goes back to biblical definitions, and it's something you're willing to sacrifice for and struggle for. And I think for you to accept the challenge of passionate energy and struggle, you've got to see yourself in that story. And the only way to do it is by building a network of people that enable that mentality, and people that you can look at and go, hey, if I do the work and I aspire to some of the attributes you possess and I follow your game plan, if I do what you do, I can have what you have. And again, back to the money is only good for the good that it does. And I think the real benefit of a strong financial world is that you have choices and you have margin, and you can really listen to that higher powered voice and invest your time and energy someday down the road after committing to the grind. And I think one of the things people also miss is that it's not easy. Every day, you've got to wake up with focused energy and submit to the grind. If it was easy, everyone would do it and everyone would have it. But when you surround yourself with a powerful network, there's even a saying that your network ultimately becomes your net worth. And so I've taken the proactive approach of making sure my network is not only wealthy financially, but wealthy holistically. And so, I think in order to really prescribe, there's a saying that says to prescribe a solution without proper diagnosis is malpractice. And, it's like the cobbler's kids without shoes. We often know the right answer, but we don't live the answer. And so my hope and my prayer in this book is that there's a process for utilizing, and by the way, it's really hard when you talk about big whys. You gotta have a big why. Most people don't have a big why. It's not, solve poverty or starvation or homelessness or well water to, areas without water. And it's probably a stacking effect of all 12 categories of life exercised at your most potential rich way. And when you stack those, that's a life well lived. And if you don't start with your eulogy or your legacy in mind, you might wake up with regret. And that's why the subplot here is finding clear directions for a regret-free life. And I've broken it down into bite-sized pieces that I think anybody can start chewing on it and find themselves in a more holistically wealthy state of mind. And then that usually leads to actual wealth.
Relationships, connections are the most important thing in life. They are. Most of us are not very good naturally at relationship because there's no, kind of blueprint, if you will, for how to be great, except there is actually And believe it or not, Jesus left this amazing blueprint, which was to serve others, expect nothing in return, sacrifice for others, expect nothing in return, forgive others and accept them for their flaws and accept nothing in return. None of us do that. Truth of the matter is he lived over 2,000 years ago, and his legacy is continuing to expand 2,000 years later. I've always thought, believe it or not, that if we think about our own lives, the people that make a difference in our lives, the connections that we have, people that care about us, serve us, that'll make a sacrifice for us, time, treasure,
Right.
whatever it is, and the people that accept us the way we are and just lean in and try to help, forgive our flaws, if you will, they wind up being the people that we're most connected to. I thank my dad because he was that guy who gave me that simple playbook. And if I'm good at one thing in life, it's that I'm intentional about the relationships that I'm in, and I try to do everything I can to lead people better. All right, so we talked a little earlier about like what we do every day. Everybody wants to be the best, but not everybody does what the best do. You have a chapter dedicated to that, which is making the most of every day. Talk to us about making the most of every day.
Well, so first and foremost, just because I write it and espouse it doesn't mean I live it. And there are days I wake up and feel, there's this whole imposter syndrome conversation that flies around with people who have significant success, and they feel almost guilty. And I think the reason I think that happens is they're giving themselves too much credit, and they're also discrediting themselves at the same time. And they haven't submitted to this is a journey and it's part of the process. And when there is a higher power or something bigger than you in play, it's just part of the process. So I let go of that self-judgment around perfection. And if you don't wake up with the mindset, I'm going to do my absolute best, you won't.
You won't.
You won't. And so I love the book by Hal Elrod, and it's called The Miracle Morning. And there's even one for realtors. There's one for financial advisors. And he's re-scripted it for different vocations. Serial. But it's awesome because in it, there's an acronym called SAVERS. And I try to live into it every day. I don't succeed, but within a week, I probably nail at least one of them, or all of them, I should say, within a week. And the first one is silence. And that's finding time to really connect with yourself and breathe. I don't know about you, but under stress, I quit breathing sometimes. I find myself, and then I gasp. I realize I'm just so tense, and tension serves nobody, especially not yourself, and it's not healthy. And so silence allows you to, meditate, pray, whatever your sacred space is to get grounded and connected. That's awesome and important daily. The A is affirmations. And I adopted the affirmation, if it's to be, why not me? If it's been done before, it can be done again. And when I keep it simple, I try not to overcomplicate things. And then it becomes a people puzzle and execution. And where's the blueprint that I need to be following, the roadmap? Because there's no road that hasn't been traveled. Just like you said, there's nothing new out there. It's just application in your world in a way that's meaningful. The V is visualizations, and that goes back to that first person, second person. Integrity, again, is when your inside voice and vision, that movie you run in your head, aligns with the behavioral attitude and energy you put into your daily activities. And so visualizations are critical. Exercise is in the mix. If you don't feel good, you're not going to play well. R is reading. If you're not enriching and growing, you're dying. And then the last one is scribing, which is a journal. And to me, the greatest superpower on the planet is forgiveness, and also recognizing the greatness, even amid things that aren't going well, and honoring what is and not what isn't, but then striving for what could be.
Yeah. What you just said about forgiveness, I think because I watched it in my family's life, I watched my mom lose 25 years of her life because she couldn't forgive herself for abandoning her kids. When we finally loved on her unconditionally enough, honored her enough, she did. And then she left this great note in her God box that I had given her. So when she passed, it was one of the great treasures that came out of that scribing, where she said that a fool, will lose tomorrow because they haven't forgiven themselves and given themselves a chance to have the better tomorrow. So if you've done something in the past, welcome to the club that you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
That's caused pain to yourself and to others. The other thing is fascinating about forgiveness. I had this conversation with Andy Stanley one time, which was, it's so easy to ask for forgiveness and want it and expect it right away. But when somebody else needs it from us, it's just much harder to give, which really kind of makes it one of those truths about the life that Jesus did lead, but it really is a truth in our own life. If we don't learn how to forgive ourselves and we don't learn how to forgive others, we'll never really unleash the connections in the fullest and richest way that we could possibly have, and we'll never be our best. One of the things about Saban when I interviewed him is he walked in the room. It's the only time in my life I was ever intimidated for about 3 minutes. He introduced himself. And
Only
I
3
was
minutes?
like, I would introduce myself back, but I don't know who I am.
Hi, I'm
Right.
Go on.
I'm not kidding you, right? So, but you know what? It's interesting because 3 years later, my reflection on that moment was, I don't think I've ever seen a person so singly focused on making sure that they were making every day count. Every minute of every day count. Yeah. There was no wasted motion, wasted time. You know, the more I found out about what he did with his day, the more it was just this amazing thing. And I just think he got into this habit of making sure that he didn't waste any time, and he knew what his definition of success was. And most people think it was winning championships. That was the byproduct, just like us making money. It was really making a difference in the lives of other younger people, giving them a roadmap about how to live their whole life past football. And that's what leaders do ultimately. By the way, I've always said that when I get to spend time behind closed doors, integrity, with other leaders, you find out the truth. Right. And I've spent a lot of those behind the closed door meetings with you, and there's only one conversation ever, and it's the one we're having right now, both of us.
Right.
And I so appreciate you for that. I really do.
Well, thanks. Your energy lends itself to that type of conversation. Conversations that matter, have more of those.
Yes, conversations that matter. The other part is that we oftentimes will tell friends, family members, coworkers what's wrong with another human being. Maybe instead of telling other people what's wrong, maybe we ought to have a direct conversation with the person that we're having connection with, and actually, in a loving way, invest in them to tell them the truth so that we can affect the trajectory of their life. You don't need a business card to be a leader. You just need to care enough about another person's life. I want to ask you, just in closing, a couple different things. First, if your son was in the audience.
Who happens to be.
Oh, he is.
One of 4, by the way. I have to honor all 4.
Right. No.
They're all awesome.
But if now at 58, if you've written a book to leave the legacy behind, but if you could give them 2 or 3 pieces of advice about stop settling so that they get to write their best story, what are those 2 or 3 pieces of advice you'd give your children who you love, but all the other folks out there who are someone else's child?
Yeah. So, that's a long list. And what's interesting, as a parent, I can't say that I was very strategic in the way I guess we didn't have here's lesson number 2, here's lesson 3. I just tried to be the best role model I could be in an authentic and sincere way. And I'm not afraid to reveal my flaws. That's a gift. I think when you guard yourself and you escape or avoid vulnerability, you escape the relationship, and you don't open doors. People, again, they're not going to open doors in their heart for you if you aren't first opening it. You've got to come from contribution. And so I think being real is step 1. Number 2, begin with the end in mind. If you're not clear what your life could look like, it'll never look like that. It's like driving without GPS and lights on at night. You're going to run into a lot of things unnecessarily. So that's important. I think embracing the reality, like you said earlier, that structure actually equals freedom. And I'm a very freelance, freestyle guy. You put me on a dance floor, I'm not line dancing. I'm not doing structured dance. I'm doing stupid things that, bad dad joke style. And that's a beautiful thing. But in life, if you have no structure, you probably won't achieve at the level you could. So you've got to, in the book, I describe it as GPS. And I use this tool. It's that 12-spoke life wheel that I spoke of. And if you can't take an honest look at where you are and you aren't clear on where you're going, GPS won't work. You have to have both coordinates. And I think owning your future and scripting it yourself is the greatest gift you can give yourself, because if you don't plan it and day plan it and it doesn't show up in a schedule, it doesn't exist. I remember I was with my son Alex in the car when he was, I bet he was in 4th, 5th grade. And I picked him up from school on a Friday afternoon, and he says, "Dad, can't wait for tomorrow. We've got, this big event going on, some kind of fair at the school." And in that moment, I felt so empty as a father because I realized I had 4 appointments. Like I had back to back to back to back Saturdays, and I had to tell him the honest truth that, I can't be there and I'm really sorry. And then I don't know, it just hit me. I'm like, if it's not in my day planner, it doesn't exist. If it is in my day planner, it's non-negotiable.
Yep.
And is a commitment. And so he teared up, and it was a real sobering, again, parent moment where I didn't have flexibility and I had to tell an honest truth that hurt. But man, it paid off because from then on, it was clear. I said, here's the secret. Just plug yourself into my day planner. Anytime it's there, nothing else interferes, and you're my priority. And so it shifted our approach, and it would just reinforce the reality that, if you're living by, again, the wind behind you, you're going to get blown in a direction that may not serve you, and it may not serve the people around you. And the greatest gift you can give the world is to be your ultimate best, and at least journey towards that so that one day you have a story worth retelling.
We talk about closing the gap here. The gap is God's potential for us and where we are. And you just talked about it with your GPS analogy, which we use in our program all the time, which is you got here today by plugging in our address, right? And that's the destination. And then there's where you were. And then there's the roads to get there, the time, and all of those things. Then there's a woman in the car that tells you when you're not on course, which is my wife.
Which
I'm
is
fascinated that it's always a woman. But sometimes it's as simple as do what you need to do daily, when you need to do it, and how it needs to be done. And the structure and discipline is just absolutely critical. So what I want to do just in wrapping up, first of all, I love Rickisms. We got a lot of Rickisms today. We will consolidate your Rickisms down to make sure that we get those points across to our audience as takeaways.
Thank you.
I also want our audience to know that we are acquiring 100 books, Stop Settling. And if you would like to stop settling, I strongly suggest you read the book. You can send us an email. Our folks will put it on our program, and I will give the first 100 request a free copy of Stop Settling so that you can not only read more about Rick's fascinating journey, but more about how it could invest a seed in your life and change your life forever so that you get to write your best life story as well. Rick, thanks so much for your time today.
Sincere pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for the integrity that you have in making yourself available, but sharing the vulnerabilities that you have in your life, because it gives us all hope to know that someone else's life hasn't been perfect, but it's not where you are, it's where you're going. And your message, your Rickisms today are incredibly powerful. And I just thank you, and I thank you for your friendship, my friend.
It's a beautiful thing. Thanks for the conversation.
Yep.
Conversations that matter.
Yep.
One of the coolest things about Supreme is we get to hang out with each other and serve the community beyond just doing loans.
Giving back to the community is very important to us here at Supreme Lending, and Habitat for Humanity is an amazing organization.
I look forward to this day every year. I believe Habitat embodies the spirit of Supreme Lending and really blends with our culture.
And I love giving back because I like to see the smile on their faces.
And I would also like to say thank you to Supreme Lending for sponsoring my new home. Thank you, Supreme. Thank you.